No one ever expected the humans to survive the first contact war, let alone win it. It started like most stories do, not with fanfare, not with glory, but with silence. A silence that stretched across the stars, thick and watching, waiting for someone to blink first. The coalition had surveyed Earth for a long time, gathering intelligence like wolves stalking prey. They saw what they believed to be a fragile world. Primitive, scattered, unprepared. Still recovering from centuries of internal conflict. A fractured species chasing illusions, clinging to fading myths of unity and peace. To them, Earth was low-hanging fruit. And maybe it was. Until it wasn't. The coalition had crushed hundreds of civilizations before. Entire species erased with surgical ease. Their warships moved like thunder. Their soldiers, trained across 3 generations of conquest, rarely saw real resistance anymore. It wasn't a question of if they'd win, only how fast. So when Earth was declared a new pacification target, there was no ceremony. No press releases. Just deployment orders and fuel calculations. One more tiny planet to burn clean. And in their arrogance they made one mistake. They didn't study Earth's war machine. Not really. They saw tanks rusting in museums. Saw documentaries about ancient wars and bitter peace treaties. Saw people who smiled more than they saluted. They mistook kindness for weakness. And they never once asked what would happen if something old was reawakened. The first contact ship landed without resistance. A diplomatic cover. A show of openness. But Earth didn't send negotiators. It sent him. He didn't wear a uniform. No medals. No insignia. Just boots, gloves, and eyes like a graveyard. No one knows what was said in that first meeting. Only that the coalition delegation sent a signal back to orbit. It was a single word. Hostile. That message was the last anyone heard from them. The satellite feed caught only static. And then the signal blacked out. The coalition didn't panic. They sent in a scout team next. 12 elite tacticians, equipped with biometric armor, neural links, and kill drones. The kind of unit that had subjugated entire cities in a day. 3 hours later, one of the scouts' helmets came back. Just the helmet. The inside was still wet. That's when the whispers began. A few in the upper command tried to pull back. They said it was too quiet. They said there were things in the Earth's archives, buried programs, deep black budgets, experiments that ended with blanked-out files and official denials. They said humanity never stopped building weapons. They just learned to bury them deeper. The fleet commander laughed. Called them superstitious. He sent down an entire legion next. 6,000 troops. Orbital support. Plasma tanks. Drones. Every single one was tracked. Every single one entered atmosphere. And not a single one reported back. The war machine had awakened. And it was hungry. No one knows his name. No rank. No record. Some call him the Reaper. Some say he's not even fully human anymore. He moves like a shadow, silent until he strikes, vanishing before sensors can react. He doesn't leave survivors. Just wreckage. Fire. Echoes. One soldier claimed to have seen him just once through shattered optics. Said he was dragging something behind him, a chain made of dog tags. The soldier shot himself an hour later. The coalition labeled it a psychological anomaly. They said fear was spreading. That Earth had developed a kind of empathy warfare. Psychological weapons designed to infect enemy morale. But even their AI couldn't explain the tactical losses. Units disappeared without distress calls. Entire squads turned on each other. Drones self-destructed without command input. And always, at the edge of the recordings, was a figure walking calmly through the smoke. The war machine. Earth didn't need a fleet. It didn't need an army. It had him. And he was enough. The coalition began locking down information. Told the member worlds it was a containment mission. Said Earth's atmosphere was corrosive. Said the human race had been evacuated. But the transmissions kept leaking out. Unedited battlefield footage. Crying soldiers begging not to be sent back down. Footage of something moving faster than their weapons could track. Something tearing into drop ships like paper. Something that knew how they fought. Something that remembered. That's when they realized it. He'd studied them. Watched their maneuvers. Predicted their lines of retreat. He let them come. And then he closed the trap. He knew their fear. He used it. Rumors spread across the fleet. Officers started refusing deployment orders. Mutinies flared up on smaller vessels. Morale cracked. And still the coalition kept pushing. Because they couldn't afford to lose. Not to a single man. Not to a single planet. The war had to be won. No matter the cost. They launched their final mission. Codename, Glassfall. An elite death squad was formed. Genetically enhanced, psych-shielded, combat-trained from birth. The best killers in the known galaxy. 7 of them. The Ebon Circle. Their mission was clear. Infiltrate Earth's last stronghold. Eliminate the target. And the myth. They touched down under a blood-red sky. Static filled their comms the moment they breached the atmosphere. Satellites turned to ash overhead. Drones failed to reboot. Still they moved forward. Urban ruins surrounded them. Streets cracked and silent. Burned-out cars. Shadows that shifted without light. A city caught in time. Then the first one vanished. No scream. No flare. Just silence. The others spread out. One by one they were taken. Until only 2 remained. They reached what looked like an old cathedral. The doors creaked open before they touched them. Inside was nothing but darkness. And a figure waiting at the altar. No armor. No gun. Just hands stained red. He looked at them. Not like an enemy. Like a mirror. And then, the feed cut. All channels dead. The last message received was a simple file name. You sent monsters. We sent one back. The Coalition has sealed Earth's quadrant now. Labeled it a quarantine zone. Navigation systems block any attempts to enter. Civilian ships are warned to stay clear. But some don't listen. Some hear the stories and want to know the truth. They go searching. They don't return. And in the silence of the void, the war machine waits. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't age. It remembers. And one day it will leave Earth. When it does, the galaxy will burn. The stars outside Coalition Command blinked like dying embers. The Admiral stood alone in the observation deck, hands trembling. He'd seen the reports. The recordings. He knew it wasn't just one man. It was something else. A species that had learned war not as a necessity but as an art. A species that had fought itself to the brink, again and again, and survived. And when someone else brought the fire to their door, they didn't run. They built a monster. And they let it loose. Somewhere deep in Earth's code was a name. A designation. A project number. But none of that mattered anymore. Now he was legend. Now he was the end of every war. And the reason why the stars were just a little bit quieter now. The Admiral closed the file. Across the room, the junior officer spoke softly. Should we try again? The Admiral didn't look up. No. He turned toward the dark glass, watching Earth slowly rotate in the distance, silent and cold. Not unless you're ready to never come back. Above Earth, in orbit long forgotten, something flickered in the static. A satellite that shouldn't be online. A single blinking light. And a message that kept repeating. Over and over. Ready. Target acquired. Standing by. The machine hadn't stopped. Was just waiting. Waiting for the next fool to try. Waiting for war to begin again. And this time it wouldn't wait for them to come. This time, it would bring the war to them. Long before the Coalition arrived, Earth had already been through its own kind of extinction. Not in a single flash like they feared, but slow, grinding, relentless. 1,000 little collapses. Oceans dying. Borders dissolving. Famine spreading like wildfire. Wars that didn't end in surrender, but in silence. And through it all, humans did what they always did. They adapted. Sometimes cruelly. Sometimes brilliantly. And sometimes they went too far. There was a time, before the quiet century, when Earth's powers raced to outdo each other with machines that could end wars in hours. Autonomous fleets. Smart drones. Chemical agents that could decide who lived and who didn't by reading DNA in the air. Some of it was science. Some of it wasn't. There were whispers about a project buried deep beneath the old mountain ranges. A joint task force formed after the last Great War. It wasn't supposed to exist. It had no name in official records. Just a symbol, a triangle made of broken chains. The project wasn't about ending wars. It was about surviving the ones you couldn't win. And that's where he came from. Not born. Not recruited. Built. Not in a lab filled with chrome and glass, but in a place lit by buzzing lights and haunted by the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. They didn't program him. They trained him the way wolves train their young, by throwing them into the dark and seeing who crawls out. He wasn't alone down there. There were others. But they didn't make it. Some broke from the inside. Others tried to escape. And some begged to be forgotten. He never spoke a word. Never asked why. Never asked when it would end. He just kept going. And one day when the doors finally opened, only he remained. There was no applause. No medals. Just a single command. Wait. So he waited. And when the sky opened and the first alien craft broke through the clouds, he finally understood what he had been waiting for. The invaders didn't understand what kind of world they were walking into. They looked at humanity and saw numbers, populations, cities, infrastructure. They didn't see the memories, the pain, the lessons carved into bone and written in ash. They didn't see the child who had crawled through war zones and grown up in the shadows of fallen empires. They didn't see the man who had survived every trial, outlived every ghost, and stood alone, unbroken. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was the last warning. And the world had unleashed him. Far from Earth, in the polished halls of Coalition Command, a quiet panic was spreading. The silence from the quarantine zone was deafening. Thousands of troops lost. Elite operatives gone. Satellites hijacked. Ships repelled. And no demands. No messages. Just static. The higher-ups had begun to turn on each other. Accusations. Cover-ups. Careers ending overnight. What had started as a routine conquest had spiraled into something ancient and ugly. Something they couldn't control. One of the younger analysts, a woman barely out of training, had started piecing things together. She didn't speak much, always buried in data. But what she found made her hands tremble. There was a pattern in the chaos. Ship losses weren't random. Each vessel taken had belonged to a unit involved in earlier wars, specifically, those that had bombed unarmed civilian targets. Units with histories of atrocities. Patterns of cruelty. It was as if the machine was remembering. Hunting. Not for strategic value. But for vengeance. Her report was flagged. Buried. She was reassigned the next day. And 2 days later, she disappeared. They told her family she had transferred off-world. But her apartment was still full of packed boxes. On Earth, days and nights passed like smoke. The cities were still empty. The skies dark and gray. But there were signs that something more was happening beneath the surface. Drones picked up flashes of light under the old capital ruins. Energy surges. Movement. Not random. Coordinated. He wasn't just surviving. He was building something. No one knew what. But it pulsed with power. And it scared the coalition more than any weapon ever had. Because it wasn't just a war machine anymore. It was becoming something else. The last pilot who escaped Earth's gravity with his mind still intact described seeing something impossible. He didn't give details. He refused to speak after that. He just sat in a corner of the debriefing room, rocking slowly, whispering over and over, "I saw it look at me." And that was enough to shut down the entire wing of operations. That fear spread like fire. Even among those who had never set foot near the planet. Ships in neighboring systems began to refuse orders. Whole outposts went dark. And still, Earth remained silent. But something was listening. Across the void, signals were being intercepted. Not coalition transmissions. Not human either. Something older. Hidden beneath the surface of the moon. A long-dormant array had powered up. It began sending out pulses, coded messages in ancient frequencies. No one had used that array in centuries. Not since the first Deep Space War. It had one purpose. Call for help. But it wasn't Earth that had activated it. It was him. The signals weren't in any known language. But when decrypted, one phrase kept repeating. Over and over. They will come. Let them come. And it wasn't just the coalition that heard it. Across the galaxy, species that had once feared humanity felt the old fear returning. Some tried to intervene. Smaller scout teams. Rogue operators. Mercenaries. All of them vanished. Sometimes a helmet floated back. Sometimes a weapon melted like wax. Sometimes, nothing. And deep in the blackness, something stirred awake. Not human. Not alien. Something in between. Born of war. Fed by silence. The coalition finally ordered a shutdown of all access routes. They called it a strategic redirection. But everyone knew what it really was. They were afraid. Not of Earth. But of what Earth had become. And no one wanted to be the next name on the long silent list. But even then, curiosity has a way of dragging people to their end. Smugglers. Scavengers. Thrill seekers. They came for salvage. For glory. For the thrill of standing on the planet that had brought the galaxy's greatest army to its knees. Most never touched the ground. Those who did, didn't come back. Except for one. He didn't give a name. Didn't say much. He walked into the border station one night, barefoot, bleeding, eyes wide. They thought he was a ghost. He just kept repeating one sentence over and over. Don't follow the lights. When they tried to question him, he went silent. Then, without warning, he bit down on something in his mouth. Foam poured from his throat. And he died smiling. as if he'd seen something terrible and understood it. In the silence that followed, the few who listened started to wonder. What if Earth hadn't just built a weapon? What if it had built a test? A warning? A challenge? Something meant to judge anyone who thought they were strong enough to control it? And what if the machine wasn't the judge? What if he was the executioner? The coalition tried again. Another covert mission. This time they didn't send soldiers. They sent a linguist, an old man who had studied humanity's ancient languages. He claimed he could speak to anyone. That understanding could heal what bullets could not. He landed quietly under radar. And for 2 weeks there was no signal. Then one morning a pod drifted back into orbit. It was empty, except for a single scrap of fabric. Torn. And a phrase written in a child's handwriting. Some doors should never be opened. They said it was a hoax. That the pod was staged. That Earth was playing psychological games. But deep down no one believed that anymore. Because deep down everyone knew. Something on that planet was awake. And it wasn't playing. It didn't care about politics. About peace. About surrender. It didn't want to talk. It wanted justice. And it would not stop until the last shadow of war had been burned clean from the stars. Now, across the coalition's outer systems, ships drift in silence. Officers whisper about black markers placed on their hulls. Strange symbols appearing overnight on equipment. The lights flicker in unison. And somewhere in the dark, he listens. Not to orders. Not to commands. To regret. To fear. To the sound of a galaxy that once thought it was untouchable, and now hides from a planet it used to pity. But the truth is, Earth doesn't care about the galaxy anymore. It doesn't need allies. It doesn't want revenge. It's just watching. Waiting. Because war left a scar so deep in humanity that no one ever truly recovered. And from that scar something was born. Not a machine. Not a man. Something in between. Something worse. Something that remembers what war really is. And when the stars finally grow quiet again, when the last brave soul dares to challenge the silence, it will move. And when it moves, the galaxy will remember why humans learned to fear themselves first. For weeks there was no movement near Earth. No ships. No signals. The border stayed quiet, like the whole quadrant had been swallowed. But something was happening. The few satellites still operational caught glimpses. Unreadable flashes, heat signatures moving too fast, old wrecks vanishing from the surface without trace. Something massive was stirring beneath the crust. Far above, in the deepest part of coalition space, a meeting was called in secret. No records. No witnesses. Just 4 figures and a decision no one wanted to admit they had to make. They weren't politicians. They weren't generals. They were the ones who operated between lines. People who never showed up in photos, who never answered to anyone except themselves. When war spun out of control, they were called in to clean the blood off the floor. The decision was simple. Destroy Earth. Not just occupy it. Not contain it. Erase it. The order was buried under layers of encryption and relayed through systems meant to self-destruct seconds later. The fleet would be assembled in silence. Over 24 capital ships, armed with weapons designed to break planets. Not bombs. Not missiles. Things older than both. Weapons born of desperation, banned by every treaty, locked away in vaults so deep even the architects who built them were executed afterward. But now they would be used. Because fear had finally grown louder than pride. And Earth was no longer seen as a planet. It was seen as a threat. The order was clear: burn everything. No ground contact. No survivors. Nothing left. The fleet moved in absolute silence. Systems dark. Comms shut down. No warning given. No second chances. They reached Earth's edge in just under 30 hours. And as the planet came into view, blue and green and gray, still spinning, still silent, no one spoke. Some couldn't look at it directly. Others stared without blinking. They didn't see cities. They saw a grave. And they had come to bury it. Inside the lead vessel, Captain Relon stood by the main viewport. He'd led dozens of strikes in his career. Reduced continents to ash. He'd been called a hero. A monster. A savior. But he had never feared the job before. Not until now. He stared at the planet and felt something watching him back. He shook off the feeling. It was just nerves. Ghost stories. A countdown began. Coordinates locked. Weapons charging. Then, without warning, the alarms went off. Not in the ships. In their minds. Panic exploded through the bridge. People clawed at their heads. Screamed. Fell to their knees. It wasn't noise. It wasn't sound. It was presence. A weight behind their eyes, pressing, choking, speaking without words. Relon backed away from the console, gasping. He felt something inside him twist. Memories not his own. Images of war. Fire. Screaming children. Cities falling. Faces, human faces, burning and bleeding and begging. And then, silence. The kind of silence that follows something you can't undo. The voice came then. Not through the comms. Inside his head. You came to bury us. He turned, heart hammering. No one else moved. Frozen. Eyes wide. Locked in the same vision. You came to end the last survivor of your sins. The lights flickered. The ship shook. And for a moment, just a moment, he saw him. Not in the flesh. In his mind. Standing at the edge of a burning field. Eyes like broken glass. Hands wrapped in wire. A chain of tags dragging behind him like a serpent. Relon staggered back, heart pounding. The vision faded. The countdown continued. But something had changed. Every weapon they fired would not just be returned. Would be understood. Felt. The war machine wasn't below. It was already here. Inside. Waiting. And just as the fleet braced to fire, Earth moved. Not with weapons. Not with ships. With light. From the poles to the oceans, massive geometric patterns lit up, old, buried circuits. Tech from the old wars. Forgotten by history. No one had touched it in over 100 years. It didn't respond to radio. Didn't react to weapons. It pulsed like a heartbeat. And then, a beam. Not up. Straight into deep space. Carved through it like a blade. Not a shot. A signal. But not a distress call. A challenge. Every AI on every ship began glitching. Calculations spun out of control. Navigation collapsed. The targeting systems turned inward, on themselves. And then the screaming began. The crew started attacking each other. Some tried to run. Others just stood there, whispering strange phrases like chants. No more chains. No more lies. No more war. Captain Relon made it to the emergency bay. He locked the doors. And then he saw the data feed. Not corrupted. Not damaged. Redacted. One by one, the files were being erased. Not from the ship, but from every coalition server. Names. Maps. Histories. Entire chunks of military memory, gone. As if Earth wasn't just fighting to survive. It was unwriting them. The beam continued. And something began rising from the Earth's surface. Not a ship. Not a drone. It was massive. Tall as a mountain. Shaped like a man but wrong. Built from old machines. Bones of tanks. Steel wrapped in barbed wire and carbon plating. A scarred banner across its chest. A single eyelid in its face. And in its hand. The chain. The war machine had come to finish what it started. Relon stared at it, breath caught in his throat. And in that last moment, just before his ship blacked out, he finally understood. This wasn't a retaliation. It wasn't even a war. It was a reckoning. Because Earth hadn't sent him out of hate. They had sent him to teach the galaxy what happens when you forget where war begins. And now the lesson was almost over. Across the fleet, ships began self-destructing. Not from attack. From shame. Systems refused to fire. Weapons jammed. AI refused commands. Earth didn't break them. Made them see. And once they really saw, they couldn't go back. But it wasn't over. Not yet. On the far side of the moon, hidden in a trench older than time, a vault opened. Not by force. By permission. Something had given the code. Inside were records no one had touched in 1,000 years. A name. A file. The origin of the war machine. Project Dustwalker. Final status, unstable. Do not deploy. Subject has exceeded intended evolution parameters. The file ended with one last note. A question written by the lead scientist before she vanished. If this is what we needed to win, then what have we become? But it was too late. The vault broadcasted the answer. And now others knew. Old enemies. New threats. The galaxy had changed. Because Earth had done what no one else could. It survived its own worst creation. And now it had released it, not to kill, but to warn. And as the ships fell from orbit and the silence returned, only one thing remained in every survivor's mind. He's still out there. He's still walking. And the war isn't over. Just waiting for the next challenger. The last survivors of the shattered fleet drifted through space like ghosts. Some ships were damaged beyond repair, running on emergency power. Others had gone completely dark, their crews either missing or silent. Every attempt to regroup had failed. Navigation was useless. Systems flickered with static, refusing to obey. Most disturbing of all, Earth wasn't chasing them. The war machine hadn't left the surface. It hadn't needed to. It had already won. Or so they thought. Until a beacon lit up on the far side of Coalition space. Not from Earth. Not from any known system. A rogue signal, encoded in an old human frequency. One not used since before first contact. The code was ancient. Military grade. From a unit long thought erased from history. And it carried only one message. He is not the only one. The Coalition scrambled. Panic spread again, faster this time. Earth had been terrifying enough. But another one? Another weapon? Another thing like him? Commanders argued whether it was a bluff. Maybe some buried Earth tech reactivating on its own. A glitch. Static playing tricks. But some weren't convinced. Some remembered the earliest days of the invasion, before Earth went quiet. Before the war machine started moving. There were rumors then. About another unit. A failed prototype. A weapon deemed too unstable. Too emotional. Too human. One that had been locked away. Not because it was dangerous, but because it refused to kill. The Coalition had dismissed those rumors. Thought they were tales told by defectors. But now they had a signal. A location. And the moment they locked on, every map shifted. A new region appeared, previously hidden, cloaked from every scan. A black zone. Dead space. No stars. No light. Just gravity. And something pulsing at the center. It wasn't Earth. But it was waiting. And someone had just woken it up. The few remaining commanders still capable of giving orders demanded answers. No one had ever heard of a second installation. Not in any file. Not even in whispered threats. But one old intelligence officer, retired, long forgotten, sent in a message from a remote station. He didn't speak. Just held up a card. A tattered badge from decades ago. And on it, the same symbol that was etched into the war machine's chest. 3 broken chains. Project Dustwalker. Unit 1 was deployed. Unit 2 was buried. But not destroyed. And now it was awake. No one knew what it wanted. Or whose side it was on. And the scariest part, neither did Earth. Back on the planet, the machine stood motionless. Not watching the stars. Listening. Its sensors flickered. Its internal systems froze. For the first time in years, something had triggered a memory loop. Not from battle. From before. From the training cages. The voices of the other candidates. The one who always spoke last. Who watched with calm eyes. Who never flinched even when the others screamed. He had a name once. But names had no meaning there. Only pain. Only survival. He was supposed to be stronger than Unit 1. But he wasn't. He was something else entirely. He had chosen not to fight. And that terrified the creators. Because they didn't understand why. They thought it was failure. But now, something deep within the Earth stirred. A piece of the machine, hidden beneath layers of code, flickered to life. And it remembered. There was one other. And he hadn't been locked away. He had left. Disappeared during the final phase. No records. No body. Just a sealed report. One line scrawled in red ink. Let him go. If he ever comes back, we'll already be dead. The war machine's single eye flared brighter. Something had changed. The galaxy wasn't reacting anymore. It was echoing. The violence. The grief. The consequences of 100 broken promises. And now, somewhere in that dark zone, Unit 2 was sending out signals. Not warnings. Not threats. Invitations. And others were answering. Not soldiers. Not fleets. People. Refugees. Survivors. Outcasts. Those cast aside by war. Drawn by a whisper none of them could explain. They followed the signal like a dream. And when they arrived, they didn't find a weapon. They found a man. Alone. Standing beneath a sky that didn't exist. With nothing but a single message carved into the stone beneath his feet. Not all of us wanted this. The Coalition couldn't make sense of it. This wasn't Earth's second weapon. It was Earth's conscience. And now it was building something. Not a fortress. A sanctuary. A place where no armies could follow. And no violence could enter. But there was one problem. He wasn't asking permission. He was taking what the galaxy owed. And in doing so he was dividing it. Because some began to defect. Not to Earth. To him. To the other war machine. The one that didn't fire. Didn't kill. Didn't forget. They started calling him something else. The last light. A being that had seen the abyss and turned away. But even he had limits. Because the galaxy had already been soaked in too much blood. And even peace, when broken too many times, begins to sharpen its own teeth. The two war machines had never spoken. Not once. Not during training. Not during the fall. But now, as Unit 1 stood on Earth and stared into the stars, he felt something he hadn't in decades. Conflict. Not from outside. From within. Because now he had a choice. And the war. Or face the one person who might still understand him. The only other one who knew what it meant to be made of war but dream of something else. And far away, under a dead sky, Unit 2 watched the stars. And whispered, "I never left you." The stars were too quiet now. Across the galaxy, systems had gone silent not from destruction but hesitation. Borders once guarded by fleets were now empty. The Coalition's war factories had stopped running. Supply lines were dead. Plans, weapons, orders, none of it mattered anymore. Because every leader, every general, every voice that once echoed with power was listening to the same thing. Two signals. One pulsing from Earth like a warning. The other, softer, calling from the void. They were the same frequency. The same code. But carrying opposite meanings. One said, "Survive at any cost." The other whispered, "We've survived enough." And somewhere in between, caught in the gravity of everything they had become, the war machine moved. He walked alone through the broken city. Ash drifted like snow. Old buildings leaned like wounded men. The wind carried voices that weren't really there, echoes of people long gone. He remembered this place. It had a name once. A street where he ran as a child. A corner where someone once held his hand. But now it was quiet. Not from fear. From finality. The war machine wasn't searching for enemies. He was searching for answers. And for the first time he wasn't sure he wanted to find them. Then the ground beneath him trembled. A ripple of energy cut through the sky, not loud but deep, like something tearing open far away. The signal from the dead zone surged. The second war machine had activated something. A response. Not a weapon. A door. Something ancient opened on the edge of known space. An artificial structure, buried in a dead star, revealed by the last light's transmission. It was older than Earth. Older than the Coalition. A machine built before the first memory. And at its center, a chamber holding a single device. Something no one recognized. But the war machine did. He had seen it once in the forgotten records of the facility where he was made. A theoretical construct. Never finished. A memory weapon. Not one that killed bodies, but truths. Ideas. History itself. The final tool. To unmake war by erasing the reason for it. The last light had found it. And he was going to use it. To wipe clean everything. Erase the war. Erase the hate. Erase the entire memory of conflict from every mind in the galaxy. To reset. And no one would remember Earth. Not the invasion. Not the machine. Not the pain. Nothing. Just peace. Forced peace. The war machine stood still as if something inside him cracked open. He remembered the screams. The fire. The children hiding under crushed buildings. The people who never had a chance to defend themselves. He had kept those memories so others wouldn't have to. But now the other part of him, the brother, the only one like him, was trying to take it all away. And somewhere in the silence of his thoughts, a voice returned. Not cold. Not metal. His own voice. The one he had before the war took everything. She's still out there. That memory cut deep. Not a battlefield. Not a mission. A hallway. A girl maybe 10 years old, hiding beneath rubble. Reaching out to him. Crying. Not begging for help. Just asking, "Will you stay?" He had stayed. Carried her out. Held her hand through the night. And when she finally slept, he had wept for the first time in years. Not for her. For what he had become. That memory mattered. All the pain, all the fire, all the loss. It meant something. To erase it wasn't peace. It was surrender. So he left Earth. He stepped into the cold of space, powered only by thought. No ship. No fleet. Just the chain wrapped around his arm and the weight of everything he had seen. And the stars parted for him. He arrived at the edge of the dead zone. The door was already open. Inside, the last light stood before the ancient machine. The chamber glowed with strange, shifting light. Memories hanging like dust. Some from Earth. Some from places the war machine had never seen. He didn't speak. Neither did the last light. But they understood each other. The second war machine turned, eyes soft. Tired. A face that looked older than time. No armor. Just bare hands and a deep silence behind his stare. "I can end it," he said. The words weren't threatening. They were heavy. Full of something the galaxy had long forgotten. Hope. The war machine stepped forward. "You'll erase them." The last light nodded. "Yes. You'll erase her." And for the first time the last light blinked. He hadn't expected that. Hadn't remembered her. The girl. The one who sang in the dark after the shelling. Who passed food through holes in collapsed buildings. Who called him not a monster but soldier man. The one who made him promise he'd never stop walking. And for a moment the war machine saw the doubt. The hesitation. The human beneath all that peace. You remember her now, he said softly. And that was all it took. The light around the device shifted. The second war machine took a step back. I didn't mean to forget. She gave it all meaning. Pause. She's gone, the last light said. Yes. And if we forget her, then we are too. Silence. And then the ancient machine began to power down. The signal faded. The chamber dimmed. Peace wasn't erasing the past. It was surviving it. But just as the chamber dimmed, it pulsed again. Once. Twice. Then the lights turned red. The system had already started. And it couldn't be stopped. Both war machines turned. The device's core was melting. A failsafe had been tripped. It wouldn't erase history. It would erase everything. Not memories. Reality. A clean wipe. Everything undone. Across the galaxy, stars began to flicker. Time slowed. Planets trembled in orbit. Systems froze. People cried out without knowing why. The machine was eating existence. And only one thing could stop it. The war machine turned to the last light. Without words they knew. Only one of them could reach the core in time. Only one of them could survive the shutdown. And the one who stayed behind would never leave. Trapped in a collapsing memory that wouldn't vanish, but loop forever. The last light stepped forward. But the war machine stopped him. No, he said. You remember her now. The last light looked away. I tried to forget. I never could. Then the war machine did something no one had ever seen. He smiled. Just once. Promise me, he said. The last light nodded. I'll carry her. The war machine turned. Walked to the core. His body glowed. The chain unwrapped from his arm and fell behind him. He reached into the light. And vanished. The machine stopped. Time returned. The stars stood still again. And in the empty chamber only the last light remained. He knelt. Took the chain. And whispered the girl's name. No one else would know it. But she would never be forgotten. The coalition, broken and reeling, never spoke of what happened. Earth was left untouched. The black zone sealed. No one dared return. But the signal changed. Now there was only one. A single pulse. Slow. Gentle. It echoed through space. Not a warning. Not a threat. Just a reminder. Of what it cost to survive. And somewhere on Earth, in a forgotten street, a flower bloomed through the concrete. Beneath it, something small and metal gleamed in the sunlight. A chain. One tag. And scratched into the steel, 3 words. I stayed behind. The galaxy didn't change overnight. But it felt like it had. In the weeks that followed the shutdown, the strange pulses stopped. The skies calmed. The last remnants of the invading fleet finally turned back, not in defeat, but in quiet surrender. No more strategies. No more commands. Just silence, peaceful, uneasy, real. Earth remained quiet. No one landed. No one scanned. Not out of fear. Out of respect. The story had passed through every channel. Whispered from station to station, from system to system. They all knew now. The war machine was gone. And what remained was something no weapon could destroy. Memory. The last light kept his promise. He didn't rebuild armies. He didn't rise to power. He wandered. Quiet, unseen, helping where others had turned away. He never gave a name. People just called him the ghost, the peacekeeper, the shadow in the crowd who always arrived right before things fell apart, and left before anyone could say thank you. In the heart of coalition space things began to shift. The chain of command that had stood for generations started to crack. Questions no one dared ask before were spoken aloud. Why had they attacked Earth? Why had they kept the secrets? Why had they buried what they couldn't control? Some of the higher ranks resigned. Others disappeared. No one mourned them. The younger leaders, those who had grown up hearing only victory stories, began looking to the stars with a different kind of ambition. Not conquest. Understanding. They didn't send fleets anymore. They sent questions. Messages. Invitations. Most of them went unanswered. But one signal, sent by a small crew of scientists to Earth's edge, received a reply. Not a voice. Not even words. Just a sound. When. Children laughing. Waves crashing on a shore. And in the background, a heartbeat. That was enough. They didn't go closer. They just listened. And what they heard was life. Somewhere on the surface, where the cities had once burned, green had returned. Not much. But it was growing. Nature rising through the wreckage like it always did. Quiet. Patient. Stronger than it looked. On one ridge, overlooking a collapsed highway, a small house stood. No. And made. Stone walls. A wooden roof. Inside, a girl, young, maybe 12, was drawing. She wasn't supposed to be here. Earth had been closed. But someone had brought her. A stranger years ago had found her drifting alone in the debris fields. No records. No ID. Just a small chain around her wrist and a name she barely remembered. He never spoke. Just walked with her. Protected her. Made sure she ate, slept, laughed. And one day he was gone. But the house was there. And she was safe. She drew every day. Not buildings. Not soldiers. People. Faces she saw in her dreams. One face came back again and again. A man with eyes like storms and hands covered in scars. She didn't know his name. But she drew him smiling. A visitor once asked her why. She said, because he stayed. Out in deep space, the last light stood at the edge of a station under repair. Workers buzzed around him, patching metal, restoring broken systems. He was just watching the stars, quiet as always. A child approached him, curious. Did you fight the war? He nodded once. Did you win? He didn't answer right away. He looked at the stars, remembering the war machine. The sound of his last steps. The way the chamber had gone still. The name carved into the tag left behind. After a long pause he said, he did. The child looked confused. But he didn't make it. The last light smiled softly. Sometimes winning means someone else gets to live. And that was all he said. Far beyond them, in a data vault long sealed, a file opened. No access. No authorization. Just a flicker. Inside, a single video. Grainy. Footage from before the war. Test room. 2 boys sitting on a cold floor. One building something out of broken parts. The other, drawing. No voices. Just the quiet of children trying to make sense of a world that hadn't yet broken them. The timestamp was corrupted. But someone had marked the file later with a word. Origin. Back in the present, the coalition built a monument. Not to victory. To survival. It stood on a moon with no name in a field of glass. A chain, forged in stone, wrapped around nothing. Just space. As if the figure it once bound had walked away. The inscription read, to the ones who remembered what pain cost, and chose to carry it. It wasn't popular with everyone. Some still wanted revenge. Some still clung to the belief that Earth should have been wiped clean. But most of the galaxy had changed. Because they had seen something they couldn't unsee. A planet that refused to die. A machine that refused to forget. And a man who gave everything, not to destroy but to end destruction. The lesson wasn't lost. In border worlds, old enemies started talking. Trade routes opened. Soldiers laid down weapons. Treaties weren't signed with fanfare. Just quiet nods and first steps. The war wasn't forgotten. It was understood. That was the difference. And even those who had never seen Earth began dreaming of it. Not as a battleground. As a home. Somewhere in a city long buried under time, a field bloomed. Flowers in every color rising from cracks in the street. And beneath one, a small stone with a single carving. Not a weapon. Not a symbol. A handprint. Small. Childlike. Left behind by the girl he once saved. And beneath it, 3 words. I remember you. Far above, on a station orbiting a forgotten sun, the last light closed his eyes. He felt the memory drift through space. Like a signal. Not of war. Of love. And somewhere deep in the code that still lived inside him, something glowed. He smiled. And for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to hope. Because Earth had done what no one expected. It didn't just survive. It taught the stars what it meant to be human. And that was something worth remembering. Always. If this story gave you chills, made you feel something, or just made you think, hit that like button so more people can find it. Share it with someone who still believes in the strength of humanity. And if you don't want to miss what happens next, subscribe and turn on the bell. There's more coming. Much more. And you'll want to be here when it drops.